And inshallah, we're still trying to keep that same thing. That's been over 30, almost 30 years.
Wow.
And so I'm really grateful for that. But the quest for
And so
knowledge, that's what I'm
you've
doing.
been keeping up with it for the most part?
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah. And
So
so,
I mean,
but it
you
was,
can. They say if you read 3 books on a particular subject, you're an expert. To most people. So you probably know a bunch about a bunch of different things.
that was, man, so my kids, and you may have, do you have kids?
I have a daughter and a son. Yeah.
Okay. So are you familiar with Sid the Science Kid?
No, not yet. No.
Okay. So there's this little cartoon thing. It's very good for learning, but he's called Sid the Science Kid, and they learn a bunch of science theories, the law of gravity, just a bunch of real things, but they learn in a kid's way.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sid's main thing is he's the kid that wants to know everything about everything, and they always laugh and say yes. So that's why his show is about learning everything. Well, that was me. My thought was once I learn to read, I want to know everything that I've missed and everything that I may have missed. I want to
Wow.
learn it. I would read. I would go to the library, and my wife knows even to this day. I would go to the library and I started reading the five six the when we had the call numbers back then. I would read everything in call number 564 to 568, which is all business. I read every business book in every library that we've ever lived. I've read section 337, which is law. I've read every law book in every library that we've ever lived in. The 900s is literature. I've read every literature book of every library that we've ever lived in. And the late 100s is the philosophy books. I've read every philosophy book of every library. And the reason for doing it was, again, I wanted to just know everything.
How much of that information do you think you retained?
I think I retained a whole lot of it. A whole lot of it.
Now,
the reason
so
I went into psychology is that.
Did you take notes or?
I did take notes because, again, I can write now. I mean, it was this was like a whole,
new world,
man.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I have volumes of various notes. But again, my strong point when I was a kid was just memorizing. And so that it sort of carried over because I would see something. I'm like, oh, man, I remember reading this in this other book. Then I go grab another book. And so now I got 2 books that I'm going to read this week because they both are mirroring one another. And so it would just keep going like that. And that was exciting to me. And so I memorized a lot of different things. Quotes. I love quotes. I love various stories. So I remember, I may not remember all the exact details of the story, maybe something I won't remember, but for the most part, yeah, I mean, that was it. And so my wife, and like I said, she can attest to it. That was just my life, man. I loved going to the library. I got a job as a part-time librarian just so I could be in the library. They told me I was overqualified. I didn't care. I said, don't pay me. Just let me be here. And that's what I did, man. I was there at the library just reading books. That was it.
Wow.
And but again, as I look back, I'm really believing, and I mentioned earlier, and I say it all the time with Allah knows best. I agree with that statement from the Quran. I was being primed the whole time. Everything, the one thing in psychology that I've learned to accept is that we are the sum total of all of our earthly experiences. And who we are today is because of what we've experienced in times past. So all of my Islamic friends, all of my now quest for knowledge, all of learning and memorizing everything else, it's as if God was saying, listen, I got something for you, but you can't understand it just yet. If I told you, it may scare you. So let me go ahead and do it a different way. And alhamdulillah, we are where we are now, man. And I'm grateful for that. The interesting twist to the story is that even though I went into psychology, I also did theology. And
what'd you say? Your phone, it went out.
Oh, sorry. I said I not only studied psychology, but I studied theology. And again, studying world religions. I mean, that was again. Now I can study them. Of all the world religions, growing up as a Seventh-day Adventist, Christian even for that matter, and of all my reading, the one religion that I was told to look out for, if I can use that terminology, aside from witchcraft and Wiccan and all the the straight satanic stuff, the only religion on this planet that I looked out for as a definite no, don't come any closer, and I don't know why, was Islam.
What people was telling you that?
Yeah. I mean, even growing up in church, man, and I'm stressing that. And I told somebody this when I was telling my story to someone else. growing up in church, the one religion that was almost, it was a great no-no was Islam, because and I'm speaking it from a third person than what was told, because there is Satan and then there's Islam, was almost the order that it was given.
Wow.
And it was like, wow, okay, yeah. And that's what I thought, yeah, okay. So I studied, went to school, got degrees and things of that nature, but went to school and became a Christian pastor. And I was a pastor, I was a teacher, I was a church builder for, I don't know what, maybe a dozen years or so, and was very, very successful in what we did. I mean, we got calls from churches across the country, even internationally. I was in Australia. I got a YouTube video. I was in Australia leading a 3-week series, leading a series in Australia. We were in Central America doing some things all across the country. I mean, my wife and I, we were able to do a lot in Christianity.
How long have you been married?
24 years.
Wow, nice.
And so it was time for the change happened right about here. I had been living and preaching and teaching and practicing, but something felt off. That's the best word I can use. It just felt off.
You were missing something.
Yeah. I mean, it almost felt like I'm preaching something and I'm taking people to the end of the cliff, but I don't have the bridge to take them over. And it's like, man, what is missing from this thing? It's just missing. And the statement that haunted me, and I used it after my conversion. I shared it to my wife, was as a Christian, that Jesus is the answer. And that question, that statement kept haunting me, because my response was, if he's the answer to all the questions, then how come Jesus doesn't answer this question? And I'm looking, I'm like, man, I'm leading him to the bridge, lead him to Jesus, lead him to Jesus. That doesn't make sense. It didn't feel right, because there's still something missing.
Yeah.
And so it was time they had church elections and things of that nature in the hierarchy of the church system. And they wanted to move me. I was already a pastor in Houston, Texas, which, for lack of better words, that's success. And the thought was, well, listen, we want to move you to Dallas. I'm like, are you kidding me? I didn't want to move to Dallas because I was having a lot of questions. And I told my wife, I didn't want to be even more in the limelight, because I was uncertain.
Unsure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, man, having thousands of people in the congregation each week, I don't know about this. And so I asked them if I can move to El Paso, Texas. Well, according to the church standards, El Paso is out in the middle, because it's out in the desert. It's like, dude, why would you want to go way out in no man's land? That's where we send people to punish them when they've done wrong. If they've committed adulteries, and we send the pastors out there into like this oblivion until they retire. Why would you want to go there? And I told my wife, I said, the reason why I'm requesting it is because it's so far behind everybody's back, and because it's out in the desert, it'll give me time to pastor a small church. But at the same time, I have a lot more time to think. I don't want to be bombarded with all the noise. I want to think, because something is not right in my head. So we went to El Paso, Texas, and we were doing very successful. We raised the church up. The church size like tripled in a few months, financially, everything. I mean, what God had blessed us to do in every other area, we were able to be blessed to do then. And people started taking note. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know what to do. This is not what I envisioned. And they were like, listen, we got a church opening over in, and they were giving me different places. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm good. But I was sitting home one Thursday, getting a sermon ready. And I remember it like it was like yesterday. I was sitting at home one Thursday, getting a sermon together, and the TV was on in the background. And I read a text in the Bible, in the book of Romans. And again, I had memorized, even right now, when I talk between Muslim and Christian conversations, I hear people talk all the time about the Quran. I say, listen, I'm still very new. I'm memorizing things, but I'm still very new in the Quran. I said, but if you go with the Bible, I can argue with Christians all day long why Christianity is not right, because I know the Bible. I know the Bible.